So, good afternoon, friends. I'm very grateful that you're here. And I have a question. Who is here for the first time? There's one, two, three, four. Okay. So welcome. I walked into the kitchen today and I saw some of our residents preparing food for tomorrow's feast. And it is, if you will, a holiday or a feast where there is for many, at the best, ambivalence. And that for Native peoples all over this country, it's a day of mourning. And you can't really begin to grasp it except if you go to, in your heart mind, to Gaza or to Sudan or to Myanmar. You know, for non-Indigenous peoples in this country, it might seem rather abstract, but it's not abstract at all. It's a living experience in our lives right now, happening right now. And this is not to send you down, you know, into unidirectional gravitational surface of grief and sorrow. But it's also not to turn away from the truth of suffering. It's so important for us to understand that touching the first noble truth, the truth of suffering, is really the opening for the path of awakening. The Buddha didn't line up, you know, the Four Noble Truths abstractly or sort of randomly. They also touch their suffering. And we're invited, as difficult as it might sound, when everyone's so jolly, or sort of, to actually find the wherewithal to be so honest, so transparent to our own experience, to see how suffering is actually organizing us toward delusion. So I asked Sensei Dainen and Sensei Kodo to be up here with me today, like my support team. I didn't want to prepare a Dharma talk. I mean, I do that all the time. So, but actually, I have not given any Dharma talks since June because of my health. And I am in this wonderful process of recovery, which is, you know, a gift, and I'm literally better every day. So that makes me very cheerful and uplifted. But I just recall the 12 days between the two heart surgeries as actually the worst experience of my life, but not suffering. Now that causes me suffering. It's all right. I'm kidding. But, and it reminds me of the experience of some young people who did an inter-year program with me many, many years ago. They, between high school and college or university, they spent a year with me traveling all over the world. Wherever I went, they went. And we were in Nepal running this nomads clinic. It was at Thupten Chuling Monastery in the Khumbu, and nuns were lined up, some of whom had leprosy, some of whom had obvious cancer, like lymphoma, you know, you could really see. there were 300 people trying to see, the clinicians. And one of the young people with me, that we were standing, I'm not a clinician, we're standing on the outside of this, to the side of this really, extremely intense crowd of people. And one of the young people said to me, "Whoa, they're in pain, but they're not suffering." Some of the people in this crowd were nuns who had been immured. They had basically walled up their huts in such a way that they really couldn't go out. And they were there doing deep, deep practice. So they had the advantage, if you will, of being in this kind of space where, through the medium of practice, the practices that were done in that tradition, which were out of the Tibetan tradition, they had transformed their suffering in such a way that they could experience pain, but they didn't make it suffering. And yet, it's to understand, by the way, I'm heading in a direction totally different than I thought I was going to. How typical. Sorry. Now I just forgot what I was going to say because I didn't prepare anything, just 83 years of mistakes. Oh, we understand that kind of suffering associated with, the grip of pain and disaster and catastrophe and genocides, but we don't really understand the suffering that comes about because we are attached to our story of our glory. That also suffering. I mean, it's kind of an unfortunate thing because you think, oh, my accomplishments, my realization, that's so wonderful, and that's why I practice. And then you realize you're grasping it, or if it doesn't arise again, you feel frustrated. I had lost my glory. But that's also suffering. And it's so powerful in the Buddhist tradition to understand that our identities, our narratives, our whining, our bragging, also all are suffering. In Buddhism, we talk about the plague of identities. I am a this, that, and the other thing. So I want to tell you a story. I planned to do it during Rahatsu, but I feel like doing it now. I know, what makes God laugh? Plans. So many years ago, I was in Thailand at a gathering of monastics, and it was called Arya Vinaya, and it was under the aegis or with the guidance of Sulak Shivaraksa. And I remember I was put into a kuti, a little meditation hut, and it's hot as heck in Thailand. I'm not a hot weather person. And my kuti mate, this is a one-person kuti, was a very stout Chinese woman who was the abbess of a major monastery in Taiwan. I remember the first night just sweating like a pig. The two of us, our backs were stuck to each other. And it was like, and I didn't move all night, I was like, oh my God. So anyway, it was a fascinating gathering of monastics from Indonesia and Tibet and Sri Lanka and so forth. And I really loved the Sri Lankan nuns. They were great. They were these kind of stout farmer wives who got tired of being wives. And there was this amazing lay woman named Ranjani. And she was happy being, a non-monastic, a layperson. But she liked these women a lot. And she then worked to get them to Taiwan, since the Bhikshuni Patimokkha was alive there. She got these wives who wanted not to be wives and not to be lay people to go to Taiwan, and they received nuns' ordination because the nuns' lineage hadn't been broken. So I kind of connected with these women. I thought they were so kind of wonderful. They just were jolly, and said that they were all kind of stout. They had their orange robes on. And Ranjani was there, the lay woman who'd made, a huge difference in their lives. And she was just fluttering around like a butterfly. Actually, I hadn't seen her since then until I went to the Sakyadhita conference in Australia. It was like, oh, Ranjani, my heroine. But in any case, at the very end of this very deep meeting of monastics, I have no idea why the people who produced the conference decided to do this. They had these incredible flashy Thai dancers, and all their things, and, come out on this little stage where we'd been lectured about the virtue of vows. And these gorgeous women were dancing, these fabulous, with all this beautiful bling on, and great, beautiful gestures. And I went over and I kind of sat with my Sri Lankan nun friends. And I sort of said, this is kind of weird. I thought in the Bhikshuni Patimokkha, you weren't supposed to observe entertainment. And one of my most favorite of that gaggle turned to me and said, phenomena. It's just phenomena. It's like, it's, if you see things as just phenomena arising and self-liberating, there's no problem. And I really had a big laugh. You guys didn't laugh, but I thought it was really, really great. And that story and the feeling stayed with me because it is about our practice. It is to, know our story, but not to be attached to our story. It is to actually sit with not knowing, with beginner's mind. And so another brief story. Forgive me, Diamond.
Oh no, close your ears to.
No,
Oh, not that story.
not that story. So about 30 years ago, I went to Albuquerque to some kind of Buddhist event and sat down at the table, good feasty food. And someone I'd met over the years, starting in the 70s, Glassman Roshi was sitting there, and actually he was across from me. And he had, the winter before, gone to our nation's capital in January to sit with his wife Jishu and a whole small group of his students in a circle on the steps of our capital to ask what should be the path ahead. He'd been abbot of ZCLA, he was abbot of New York Zen Center in Yonkers, big mansion and all this, and he felt he had to do something different. He was just at that inflection point in his life. And he told me the story. And then he said, when we were sitting, what I realize is that we have to really sit with not knowing. What is it to have this kind of radically open space within our heart and mind and the body, radically open, relaxed, instead of contracted here and there? And this was in the pitch of the AIDS crisis. And I was working intensively with actually many men who were dying hard deaths of AIDS. And at the same time, I was a volunteer in the prison system on death row and maximum security. And when Bernie said that to me, my mind was blown. I was like, because I saw in all the decades of practice and also of working in situations of extreme suffering that I had been working from a basis of knowing. And I was like, I felt like eek. You know, I'm talking about decades of work. And I realized that I had used that knowing, the story, the so-called facts, the research, the algorithms as a defense against bearing witness to the suffering of others, separating from the suffering of others through my conceptual mind. And it kind of blew my mind. I was like, oh my Buddha. I just completely missed the Dharma boat. And so Bernie explained to me that he and his wife Jishu had developed this approach called the 3 tenets. The first is not knowing what it is to be in beginner's mind. It actually reminded me of my first Zen teacher who used to say, only keep Donoman. It's like, every time he said it, I knew, so to speak. But when Bernie opened up this not knowing, and I saw it so closely aligned with Suzuki Roshi's beginner's mind, this kind of radical openness, where the story or the concepts were not mediating my experience, I was so moved because I realized I had walked into the prison system knowing, and I was scared. And I had sat with men in agony, dying of AIDS, with knowing, and I was scared. And I realized if you're going to be involved in any way in deep practice, but also in service to others in the spirit of the bodhisattvas, you have to really rest in this kind of radical openness. And then he said the second tenet is bearing witness. And that this experience of bearing witness is not distal. It's not being a bystander. It's actually the experience of absolute connection to what is arising in any given moment, not separating from. And this became so powerful for me when a few years later I went to Auschwitz with Bernie and sat, on the railroad tracks, bringing, Jews, gypsies, queer people to be incinerated. This one lives, this one dies. And sitting on that site of so much suffering and bearing witness to what was arising within me, but also the history of that place. And like I said just now, not separating from the truth of what's happening in Sudan, in Gaza, and also Ukraine, in Myanmar. Dozens of wars. How many genocides happening now? Bearing witness. And what was it to be stripped down, as was my experience, in bearing witness to the history of genocide and what had happened at Auschwitz? And then, Bernie said the third tenet is compassionate action or loving action or healing. That the foundation to actually of being a bodhisattva, of loving action, was in fact being radically open and not separating from the truth of suffering, any kind of suffering. And out of not knowing and bearing witness, then what arises is congruent, aligned compassion that is non-prescriptive, that is deeply spontaneous, not an algorithm, but this experience of non-separateness. And I have to tell you, I didn't eat lunch. I ate Bernie's words. That was the meal that I ate. Because I realized that I had the opportunity to not only turn toward the work with people who were suffering, but also to my own mind and heart and body in that way. And then also living in a practice community where we share common vows, where we vow not to engage in violence, in rageaholism, in cruelty to the best of our ability, where we see ourselves in others and others in ourselves. That one of the most powerful medium, in fact, for actualizing the maturation of the three tenets is actually living in a practice community, which I have done since 1979. Oh, I guarantee, and I think Kodo and Dinan will say, it is deep, really the deepest work. The deepest work. In sitting with the three tenets, I recognize this is the Eightfold Path of the Buddha. Absolutely. This tenet of not knowing is actually what it means to have what? What is the first fold in the Eightfold Path? Priest. Okay. Not knowing. You know what it is? It's right view. Right view. And the second fold in the Eightfold Path is right aspiration. And right view and right aspiration point to, importantly enough, the experience of prajna, of wisdom. What it is to be a wise person, not caught in story, not caught in identity, not caught in narrow views, but not knowing, open in this way. Well, you know, that's pretty tough for Western people who rely so much. It's really smart people to my left and my right. And, you know, but they're young. Pretty soon, you know, some other kind of field arises within you and you realize, I really don't know anything. But the Buddha nailed it. This is what prajna is. The very first fold of the Eightfold Path is of right view, freedom from views. Isn't that wild? It's so clever, but so important. And I remember I practiced with Thich Nhat Hanh for very closely for 11 years. And Thai would say in the first of the precepts, it was like, I'll get it wrong, but do not be bound to any doctrine, theory, or ideology. All systems of thought are not guiding means. And I was like, oh boy, that is just so powerful. So powerful. So that's the first two. Compassion actually is the pivot of the Eightfold Path. Do you remember what that is, Todd? Okay. It has to do with that. I always tell my students, study classical Buddhism. Right? Right? Please. Because you'll get called upon. So speech, action, and livelihood. What is it to live with right speech? What is it to live with speech that is healing? What is it to actualize sila, the precepts what is it to understand that speech, action, and livelihood all are about relationality, connection with the world and with others? And that's what loving action is. Loving action is not disconnecting, but loving action is actually connecting in the spirit of the bodhisattva attitude of how can I really be of benefit to others? And what samadhi teaches us as we realize it or experience it, it's just fascinating because it actually allows us to see that we live in a non-dual world fundamentally. It's fundamental non-duality, non-separateness. Just like the jewel net of Indra, which I won't give that talk now. So what is it to live preceptually? Truly, to live in this way where we embody the attitude of the bodhisattva, an attitude that's characterized by, and last year I talked a lot about this, appamada. Mm-hmm. Wendy, what does appamada frequently translate as?
You translate it as care, but it's vigilance.
Yeah.
Or, yeah.
Conscientiousness.
Okay.
They've got it. Thank you for studying and listening to my talks. So nice of you. Conscientiousness and care. This is appamada. This is living preceptually, moment by moment, deeply connected, non-separate. Samadhi. Samadhi is non-separate, but sila is with this aspiration to be truly of benefit to others from a place of radical openness. And the last, part of the Eightfold Path is what the samadhi part is, or bearing witness part, not separating from things as they are. Yeah. So I first of all, I want to encourage you to study Buddhism, not as a conceptual experience, but as a lived experience. I mean, the Buddha had such tremendous insights, but we're called to test those insights in relation to our moment-to-moment experience. It's not to buy the package just stupidly off the Buddha shelf. It's actually to test the premises and the teachings of the Buddha diligently, deeply, self-honestly, in terms of how we are living our daily lives. So, Kodo-san, maybe you'd like to say a few things about the three tenets, and then I'm going to invite you.
The third tenet is, which you didn't even say the word action when you were just introducing it, because it's like, sometimes it's translated as loving action or compassionate action or appropriate action, the appropriate response. But I think what you were saying and what I heard Bernie teach on when he was here was, it's the action arising from not knowing and bearing witness. And that the kind of the spontaneity that entails, that has to have, is kind of terrifying. To come up here, to have no idea what you're going to say, to have, he told me I'm going to probably ask you a question, but I won't tell you what I'm going to ask you about.
I was going to ask you.
But really, I mean, it's more fun that way, isn't it?
It is.
Because I can come up here with, a whole talk and know some things and hopefully transmit my own curiosity and enjoy with the Dharma. But there's always the dream of coming up here with nothing and just seeing what arises. So thank you for for the spontaneous response. And of course, it makes me think of the koan, or the saying from Zen. I'm not sure which koan it is, but the student asks the teacher, "What is the teaching of a whole life?" And the answer is an appropriate response. So that's kind of, how to be spontaneous and have the appropriate response. It's like we have to have both the kind of the knowledge base, the study, and to then come in with not really knowing, right? The dropping our opinion about what's right. But we can't just like, oh, knowledge is useless. We're just gonna, we're just gonna do whatever. There's like a spiritual technology here. And I love that you brought up the Eightfold Path. And I always have trouble remembering the order. Is it then the last ones are right effort and right concentration?
Right concentration, right mindfulness.
Right concentration and right mindfulness. Okay. So yeah, so I got to study more too. But and then I love how you relate it to the three tenets, and also to, I don't know, did you just do this or was I just thinking of it? The Shila, Samadhi, and Prajna.
Yeah,
But it's reverse.
that's
It's like
right.
it's actually Prajna first with view and aspiration, and then Shila, and then Samadhi. I guess you did say that, didn't you?
No, but it's the threefold training, which is the essentializing of the Eightfold Path. So Sila or Shila is precepts, and Samadhi is what? Concentration, and Prajna is what? Wisdom, exactly. It's a beautiful system, because here's the thing, and I really like the threefold training as a kind of model. When you live preceptually, when you live by vow, when you endeavor truly not to harm others, Samadhi is available. Your concentration can really deepen, free of anxiety or grasping. If your mind's all over the place, or you're trying like this, Samadhi's not available to you. You're confused. There's a lot of confusion in the world, whether it's our iPhone, social media, or all of the distractions that we allow ourselves to actually be caught in the grip of. So Sila allows us to actually connect in an unmediated way with things as they are. Unafraid, not grasping, not deluded. Do not harm. Do not harm body, speech, and mind. And then, with Samadhi there, wisdom arises. Prajna arises. And that is what is really so incredible to realize. You can't access prajna if you're going around blah-blahing and putting people down and feeling irritable, and there's no prajna available, no wisdom available. And the wiser you get, the more you want to live by vow. So it's this beautiful circularity. The more you live by vow, the more you love, the more you offer yourself to the benefit of others, the less you're caught in your accomplishments and story, the deeper your samadhi is, bearing witness. And from this kind of connection, then, your natural wisdom is liberated in your experience. And then you want to clean up your act even more, if you know what I'm saying. Dinan.
Thank you, Roshi. You said it was a test. that we have to test the Dharma through our life, and like Kodo said, we didn't know what we were into when we came up here. So 15 minutes before we came, I asked Roshi, so what are we talking about tonight? And she said, we're just going to go up there and relax. I'm like, okay. But I think that actually that teaching is the whole teaching of the three tenets. Because like if you are in fear, and if you think you know, but you're faced with uncertainty, then you can't relax, right? So the not knowing can't happen because you're trying to kind of put together your ego. And Roshi's like, you just go up there and relax and not perform. And the performing is that kind of blah blahing that Roshi's talking about, putting ourselves together moment by moment. Bernie always says, my biggest addiction is to myself. So Roshi is saying everything's phenomena. But what is the stickiest phenomena? That's ourself, right? Waying's laughing. Yeah. So that's the hardest part to do, is to let go of that phenomena and to just relax. If we're trying to, hold on to this self that, oh, I'm so smart, or I need to come up here and, show how cool and smart and whatever I am, then I'm in fear because I'm scared of losing myself. I'm scared of acting like, I don't know what I'm doing, which I don't. and so I think that kind of relaxation is the whole teaching. Bearing witness. How are we going to bear witness to reality if we're fearful, if we're, worried about what's going to happen to us? And, sometimes in community, people's stuff come up, and as teachers, oh, okay, that's part of being in a community of practice. Our stuff comes up because that's a chance for us to look at it, because it's a safe place for our stuff to come up. So everybody's stuff come up, and so people will act in ways that are maybe angry or fearful. And for us as teachers, Senko knows very, very well this. He's our residency director, so he works with a lot of things that come up in the community. And when we're faced with someone who is fearful, who's angry, who's kind of projecting their aversion onto you, how do we stay centered and also not get sucked away by their fear? And that's when we have to let go of ourselves, of not letting, having to like control everything. So that's, that relaxation is the biggest teaching. I'm trying to relax right now, but it's really a sense of not needing to be any way and just be natural in every moment.
Oh my goodness.
Oh.
So this seems like the appropriate place to conclude, since we're almost at the hour. I just feel very proud of my friends here. Thank you both so much. Yeah. Please study the Dharma deeply. Please practice deeply. We say, do not squander your life. We really have an invitation to awaken. The world, I often say, needs people who are clearly loving, strong, grounded, and open, and who know how to keep their boat and mast upright in the middle of stormy seas. as a person in my 9th decade, having lived through many things, politically, socially, psychologically, recognize what your real priorities are and live them. Please. Thank you for your practice.